I didn't expect my world to shatter in a hospital room, but that's exactly where it happened. I had just given birth, still groggy from the epidural, still overwhelmed by the sheer miracle of holding a brand new life in my arms. She was beautiful. 10 tiny fingers, dark hair like mine, and the calmest little eyes I'd ever seen. We named her Ava. Everything felt like it was finally falling into place. After years of trying, years of doctors and medications and crushed hopes, I finally had both of my daughters. Lila, my 5-year-old, was waiting at home, eager to meet her baby sister, and I was proud. I had fought through everything to bring them into this world, but as I looked down at Ava's perfect little face, something shifted in the room. Trent, my husband of 10 years, was standing beside the bed, silent. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't crying, he wasn't moved. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. I thought maybe he was just overwhelmed, maybe it was too much too fast. So I reached for his hand and whispered, "Isn't she perfect?" That's when he said it. He looked right at the nurse, then at me, and said, cold as ice, "That baby's not mine, she's too perfect." I blinked, confused, thinking I'd misheard. But the nurse froze. Her smile faltered. I saw it in her eyes, hesitation, discomfort, something flickering beneath the surface. She didn't respond. She just glanced toward the door, like she was waiting for someone to intervene. I was stunned. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or scream. I turned to Trent and said, "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer me. Instead, he stepped back from the bed, still staring at Ava with suspicion. Her eyes, her nose. "That's not me," he muttered. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything we had been through, appointments, treatments, IVF, support groups, he was accusing me of what? Of cheating, of lying, of bringing a child into this world that wasn't his? The room felt like it was spinning. My hands were shaking. I clutched Ava closer to my chest, like I needed to protect her not just from the world, but from her own father. That's when the door opened, and Dr. Kessler walked in. He was holding a manila envelope. His face was calm, professional, almost too calm. He glanced at the nurse, then at me, then finally at Trent. "You're right," he said. Trent's face broke into a smirk, a smug, satisfied look I'd never seen on him before. He nodded, as if to say, "I knew it." But before I could even ask what was happening, Dr. Kessler continued, "She's not yours." Time stopped. I could barely breathe. I felt my heart pounding against my ribcage, my mind racing to make sense of it. Not mine. What did that even mean? I was about to demand answers, but the doctor wasn't done. He turned slightly, looking Trent dead in the eye. "And neither is your other daughter." Trent's smirk vanished. He blinked in confusion. "She's hers," Dr. Kessler said, nodding toward me. "Want to see your mother's signature?" And just like that, the air left the room. The nurse backed away. Trent didn't move. I didn't move. My entire body went cold. I looked down at Ava again, my hands trembling, my mind screaming with questions. What did he mean? "Neither is your other daughter." What signature? Whose signature? I stared at the doctor, trying to find meaning in his words. But in that moment, all I knew was this. Nothing was what I thought it was. And my life was about to split in two. Before everything fell apart in that hospital room, my life had already been hanging by a thread. But I didn't realize it. I thought I was building something real, something sacred. I thought my family, imperfect as it was, still had love holding it together. My name is Ella Morgan. I'm 32 years old. I've been married to Trent for 10 years. We met in college during my final semester at community college and his last year of a business degree. He was charming then, confident, ambitious, the kind of man who always knew what he wanted and didn't stop until he got it. At first, I loved that about him. He made decisions quickly, talked like he had life figured out. After a few months of dating, he told me he wanted us to move in together. He said, "Why waste time?" I was flattered. Looking back, I realized that was the first red flag, but I ignored it. Just like I ignored the little ways he'd take over everything. Where we lived, what car we drove, even which friends I saw. We got married the next year. My mother, Miriam, was thrilled. Too thrilled. She'd never liked any of the guys I dated before Trent, but with him, it was different. She said he was a man with a plan. I should have known that when my mother approved of something without hesitation, I needed to look closer. Miriam always had a way of inserting herself into my life. She called it guidance, but it was really control. When I got my first job as a medical assistant, she insisted I work part-time to focus on my marriage. When we talked about having kids, she made it clear she expected me to stay home once they were born. She wasn't loud about it. She was calculated, persuasive. She planted doubts, made me question myself, always with a smile and a reason. I struggled to get pregnant for years. It broke me. I saw doctors, tried every fertility option we could afford, and blamed myself constantly. Trent said all the right things in public. We're in this together. She's so strong. But in private, I could feel the disappointment rolling off him in waves. Eventually, IVF became our only option. It was Miriam who offered to help pay for it. She said it was her gift to us. At the time, I was so grateful I didn't question her involvement. She came to appointments when Trent couldn't. She helped with paperwork. I signed things she handed me because she always said, "It's just a formality, honey." That's how Lila came into the world. My first daughter. My miracle. She was 5 pounds, beautiful, and everything I'd ever dreamed of. From the moment I held her, I felt something inside me finally click into place. But motherhood didn't fix my marriage the way I'd hoped. Trent grew more distant, more withdrawn. He worked long hours. He stopped noticing when I cried. I began to feel like we were co-parents more than partners. Still, I stayed. For Lila. For the family I thought I was protecting. 5 years later, when I found out I was pregnant again, naturally this time, I was stunned. I thought maybe it was a second chance, a sign. Trent didn't react how I expected. He barely smiled, said, "Are you sure it's real?" That stung. I told myself he was just shocked, maybe scared. I didn't tell Miriam right away. Something inside me hesitated, like a small warning bell I couldn't quite place. But eventually, she found out. And once again, she stepped in. She came to appointments, brought vitamins, even bought a crib for the baby's room. I was still trying to hold everything together. Smiling when I dropped Lila off at preschool. Cooking dinners Trent never said thank you for. Telling myself we just needed a little more time, a little more love, and it would all fall back into place. But in that hospital room, when Trent refused to hold our daughter, every lie I'd been telling myself crumbled. In that moment, I realized I didn't really know the man I'd married, and I definitely didn't understand the lengths my mother had gone to shape the life I was living. The truth didn't just shake my world. It shattered the illusion I had wrapped around myself like a blanket. And that's when the real story began. I didn't move. I couldn't. The words had hit so hard I felt like my body was disconnected from my mind. "She's not yours," Dr. Kessler had said to Trent. I looked down at Ava, my daughter. She was still tucked in the blanket, barely crying, her little fingers curling around my pinky. Nothing about her had changed. She was still mine. But suddenly, Trent's coldness wasn't just about his ego. It was about something deeper, something that had started long before this moment. Trent stepped away from the bed like he was stepping away from a crime scene. His smirk was smug, self-righteous, like he'd just won an argument he'd been waiting to start. And in that moment, I realized he hadn't come to the hospital to meet his daughter. He'd come to accuse me. He wanted to be right more than he wanted to be a father. The nurse's hands trembled as she adjusted Ava's chart. She glanced at me like she wanted to say something but couldn't. My chest was tight, my mouth dry. I wanted to ask what the hell was going on, but then the doctor said the words that cracked the foundation of my entire life. "And neither is your other daughter. She's hers. Want to see your mother's signature?" Trent's smirk fell flat, his brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" he snapped. But I already knew something was wrong. I didn't know how deep it went, but I could feel it, like a sickness rising from the pit of my stomach. Dr. Kessler opened the envelope. "This is the paperwork signed at St. Margaret's 5 years ago," he said. "Consent forms, parental declarations, postnatal record amendments, all signed with a power of attorney granted by Ella Morgan," he looked at me, "to Miriam Blake, my mother." I shook my head slowly. No, that's not right. I never gave her power of attorney. He raised an eyebrow. You did, technically. 2 weeks before your embryo transfer when you were hospitalized for a minor complication. It was temporary, a precaution. But it gave her full authority over your medical and legal choices for 72 hours. I felt dizzy. My mind flashed back to that hospital stay, how I was drowsy, in pain, and Miriam had brought me a folder and said, "Just sign this, sweetheart, it's so they can move the schedule forward. You'll thank me later." And I had, without reading it. I had trusted her. "What does that mean?" Trent barked, getting louder. "Are you saying Lila's not mine? You're saying her mother is her grandmother?" Dr. Kessler didn't flinch. "I'm saying the paperwork identifies Miriam Blake as the legal guardian and co-parent during the implantation process. Biologically, Ella is Lila's mother, but the sperm donor listed is not you." I couldn't breathe. I clutched Ava tighter, my mind unraveling faster than I could keep up. Trent turned to me like I was a stranger. "You let your mother do this?" His voice was sharp, filled with something between disgust and rage. "I didn't know," I said, barely able to hear myself. "I didn't know she did that." "Bullshit," he spat. "You've been lying to me for 5 years." "I didn't lie," I snapped back, finally finding my voice. "I've been lied to just as much as you." He stared at me, eyes burning. "This whole thing has been a lie. This family, fake, you, manipulated." Then he walked out. Just like that. No goodbye, no second glance. The door slammed behind him and I was left sitting there, cradling one daughter and wondering how I'd ever face the other. How would I explain to Lila that the man she called Daddy wasn't who we thought he was? That her birth, her existence, had been wrapped in a chain of lies I didn't even know I was a part of? The doctor tried to reassure me, said there were options, legal steps, therapy, support groups, but none of that mattered in the moment. What mattered was that my world had been rewritten in a single breath, and I had no idea what the next chapter looked like. All I knew was this: if I wanted the truth, I was going to have to dig deeper. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone else write my story for me. I didn't sleep that night. After the chaos at the hospital, the accusations, the documents, Trent storming out, I was left alone in that sterile room with my newborn daughter and a heart full of unanswered questions. The silence after everyone had gone was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I stared at Ava. Her little eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, her chest rising and falling in the soft rhythm of sleep. So peaceful, so unaware, and somehow that made it worse. Because if I didn't fight now, she would grow up in the middle of a lie I hadn't chosen, but had to face. I knew Trent wasn't coming back. I could feel it. That door had closed, maybe forever. But this wasn't just about him. This was about Lila, about Ava, about me, and about my mother, Miriam, who, as it turned out, hadn't been a protective guide through my life, but the one quietly steering it for her own reasons. That morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Jonah, my older brother. Jonah and I hadn't always been close. He left home young, went no contact with Miriam for years after she tried to convince him to stay in town instead of following his dream to study law. But when I told him what happened, I didn't even have to finish the sentence. He said, "I'm coming over." He arrived within the hour, legal pad in hand, his expression already moving through a dozen possibilities. Jonah was a paralegal now, working toward his bar exam, and he'd seen enough ugly family law cases to know this was serious. "What she did," he said, "sounds like medical and legal fraud. She abused power of attorney, potentially forged documents, and, if she knowingly filed false paternity, there may be criminal implications." The second call was to the hospital administration. I demanded copies of every document Miriam had touched, every form she'd signed, and every communication logged under my name or hers. The woman on the phone sounded nervous but promised to escalate the request to legal. It was a start. Meanwhile, Jonah and I started digging. He showed me how to file a FOIA request, how to request medical records, how to challenge legal guardianship filings. He helped me draft a demand letter to the clinic that had done my IVF 5 years ago, insisting they provide a complete record of the procedure, donors, and identity verification used at the time. But the deeper we dug, the sicker I felt. I found paperwork I didn't remember signing, consent forms, amended birth certificates, hospital records that listed Miriam Blake as co-parent for Lila's birth, even though I was awake and present the entire time. How had I missed this? How had no one stopped her? Jonah answered that for me. Because people like Miriam count on trust. They wear it like armor. She didn't sneak through a back door, Ella. She walked in through the front, and nobody questioned it because she was your mother. It hurt. Not just because he was right, but because it meant this betrayal wasn't some freak mistake. It was engineered, planned, carried out step by step. But I wasn't that scared, broken girl from 5 years ago anymore. This time, I wasn't going to stay silent. I wasn't going to let someone else decide what happened to me or my children. I scheduled a meeting with a family law attorney and began the paperwork to file for full custody of Lila and Ava. Not just to protect them from Trent, but from anyone, including Miriam, who thought they had the right to override my role as their mother. I also hired a private lab to run a DNA test, not just to confirm my maternity, even though I knew it in my soul, but to ensure there was no room for manipulation or doubt down the road. I needed the truth on paper, cold, clean facts, and finally I did something I should have done years ago. I blocked Miriam. No texts, no emails, no just checking in calls. I didn't want apologies, explanations, or justifications. I wanted space to think, to breathe, to reclaim the parts of my life that had quietly been stolen, one signature at a time. As I packed a small overnight bag for Lila, who'd been staying with a friend during the birth, I looked out the window at the rising sun, a new day, a new fight, and this time, I was stepping into it with my eyes wide open, because I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a mother, and I was done being a pawn in someone else's story. The truth didn't come with a scream. It didn't crash through the walls or shake the floor. It arrived in a white envelope, quietly delivered by a courier 2 weeks after Ava's birth, just as the snow began to melt outside our small house. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across the floor, the sound of cartoons playing faintly in the background as Lila built a puzzle nearby. My hands shook as I opened it, the DNA results, the lab seal. Every test confirmed what I already knew deep in my bones. I was the biological mother of both Lila and Ava. Trent was not their father. But the most devastating part, the documents showed that Miriam, my mother, had interfered with the donor process. Somehow, during the IVF cycle for Lila, she had submitted alternate donor materials, claiming she was acting in my best interest. The clinic had no reason to question it. She had my signed, though coerced, power of attorney and handled all communication while I recovered from minor complications. She'd replaced the donor Trent and I had selected together with one of her choosing. I don't know how she did it. I don't even think she cared about the logistics. All she cared about was control. And now, thanks to Jonah's legal work and the relentless pressure we'd put on the clinic, we had proof. It was time for a confrontation. I didn't go alone. Jonah came with me, standing just behind me like a silent shield. We pulled into the driveway of Miriam's perfect little suburban house. White shutters, trimmed hedges, the same ceramic angel still perched on the porch swing like it had watched over every lie she'd ever told. She opened the door like she was expecting me, still dressed in her usual soft pink sweater and pearls, a smile playing on her lips like she wasn't the architect of my undoing. "Ella, sweetheart," she said, stepping forward to embrace me. I held up the envelope. Her smile faded. "You signed custody paperwork, falsified paternity, manipulated my IVF records," I said, my voice steady but low. "And now I have the documents to prove it." She looked at Jonah, then back at me. "I did what any good mother would do. You were making bad decisions. Trent was weak. He never would have lasted. I gave you strong bloodlines. You should be thanking me." That was it. That was her justification. I took a step forward. "You don't get to rewrite my life and call it love. You don't get to decide whose blood is strong or weak. You stole choices from me, Miriam. You robbed Trent of the truth. You turned my children into pawns. They're mine too, she snapped, something sharp rising in her voice for the first time. No, I said, they are not. You are no longer part of their lives. I'm filing for a restraining order. You'll have no contact, no visits, no calls. This is over. She started to argue, but Jonah stepped forward. Say another word and we'll pursue charges for fraud and medical malpractice. You can explain to a judge how you hijacked your daughter's reproductive rights. Miriam's face twisted, lips trembling with rage that had no place to go. She slammed the door, and just like that, the grip she had on me, on all of us, was broken. In the days that followed, I moved fast. My attorney filed the legal motions. The court granted temporary full custody. Miriam was officially blocked from any access to the children. Trent tried to fight it at first, but once the truth went public, once he realized he had no legal standing, he backed down. He moved out of state. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't peaceful, but it was honest. And for the first time in years, I felt free. One night, while rocking Ava to sleep, I watched Lila dance in the living room, her curls bouncing as she twirled to the music. Her laughter was real, her joy untouched. And I realized something. The blood in their veins didn't matter. The names on their birth certificates didn't define them. What mattered was who showed up, who stayed, who loved them fully and fiercely. That was me. Not Trent, not Miriam, just me. And I was done being silent. I never imagined I'd be rebuilding my life from the ground up at 32. With 2 daughters, a mountain of legal paperwork, and a silence in the house that used to be filled with expectations I never agreed to. But maybe starting over isn't always a disaster. Sometimes it's exactly what you need to find your way back to yourself. After the confrontation with Miriam, everything moved quickly. The courts moved to protect my rights as the sole legal guardian of both Lila and Ava. My attorney called it a rare but righteous outcome. Trent didn't show up to the last hearing. I heard through mutual contacts that he left the state. Something about needing a clean break. That was fine with me. I didn't need an apology. I just needed distance. As for Miriam, she tried reaching out, letters in the mail, voicemails from unknown numbers, even flowers on Ava's half-birthday with a card that read, "You'll understand someday." I threw it all away. I didn't need to understand her brand of love. I just needed to unlearn it. There's a kind of quiet that follows chaos, not the comforting kind, the kind that lingers and makes you question everything. Was I blind? Was I weak? How many times had I swallowed my own instincts because I didn't want to upset anyone? How many years had I spent trying to be the daughter, the wife, the mother they all wanted, without asking what I wanted? It was Jonah who helped me start answering those questions. He came by often, bringing groceries, making Lila laugh with his bad impersonations, holding Ava so I could nap for 20 minutes without guilt. One night, after the girls were asleep, he looked at me and said, "You didn't just survive this, Elle. You untangled it. That's rare. Most people stay stuck. You didn't." I hadn't thought of it that way before. I started going to therapy. I found a counselor who specialized in family betrayal and medical trauma. We talked about boundaries, what they meant, how to build them, how to enforce them without shame. I learned how to stop explaining myself to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I started journaling. I went for walks. I forgave myself. Most importantly, I stopped chasing closure from people who had already made their choices. That was the real freedom. Lila adjusted better than I expected. I waited a long time to explain everything to her. I kept it age-appropriate, but honest. I told her that families come in all shapes, that sometimes people we love make mistakes, and that none of it was her fault. I told her I loved her, and that would never change. She nodded. Then she asked if she could help feed Ava her bottle that night. Kids are resilient, sometimes more than we give them credit for. Ava is thriving. She's hitting all her milestones early, smiling like the world hasn't betrayed her yet. And every time I hold her, I remind myself that her story, and Lila's, isn't just about deception or control. It's about truth, about choosing to break a cycle before it breaks you. And me? I've found a new version of strength. Not the loud, armor-wearing kind that I used to envy in other women. Mine is quiet, steady. It looks like making my own choices, like saying no without guilt, like showing up for myself the way I show up for my daughters. I'm not the same woman who walked into that hospital room 6 weeks ago. That version of me was terrified to ask questions, afraid to disrupt what seemed stable. But stability built on lies isn't stability. It's a trap. I see that now. This experience didn't destroy me. It revealed me. And as painful as it was, I'm grateful. Because now, every decision I make is mine. Every moment with my daughters is real. Every smile, every bedtime story, every whispered "I love you" is unfiltered by manipulation or fear. I ended up writing a letter, just for myself. I read it out loud one night when the house was quiet and both girls were asleep. It said, "Dear Lila and Ava, if you ever feel like your life is being controlled, if someone tries to decide who you should be, I want you to know you have the right to push back. You are not anyone's project. You are not a mistake to be corrected or a legacy to be polished. You are yours. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you always know that. That's the story I want them to carry. That's the story I finally believe in."